Hello there, and welcome. Whenever you're ready, you can let your body rest and let your thoughts do whatever they do, without needing to follow them. Tonight, we'll explore the subconscious mind as something ordinary and quietly helpful, like a night shift that keeps working with the lights turned low. Perhaps you'll notice that you don't need to remember any of it. You can simply listen and let each gentle fact drift past. The way moonlight moves across a still room. In many experiments, what you notice next can be shaped by what you've seen before, even when you're not trying to remember it. Researchers call this priming, like the mind leaving a faint fingerprint on the glass of attention. It can be as small as a word that feels easier to read, or an idea that feels slightly more familiar, simply because it passed by earlier. Nothing mystical is required for this. It's the brain doing what brains often do, using the recent past to soften the next moment. And perhaps, tonight, you can let that be comforting. Your mind has quiet ways of preparing the path. While you do nothing at all, sometimes memory shows up without a story attached. You might not recall where you learned something, yet it still guides a choice, a preference, or a small sense of recognition. In psychology, this is often described as implicit memory, learning that influences you without needing to be spoken aloud. It's as if the mind keeps a soft library in the dark. With shelves, you never have to visit deliberately. The books simply leave a little warmth in the room. So if thoughts drift in and out tonight, you don't need to chase them. Some kinds of knowing are allowed to be silent. The feeling of the "I know this" can come first, and the reasons can arrive later, or not at all. In everyday life, that might look like recognizing a face before you remember the name, or sensing that a place feels safe before you can explain why. This is one way the subconscious can be understood. First, background pattern matching. It doesn't need to make a speech. It only needs to offer a gentle signal, familiar, neutral, or quietly welcoming. And perhaps you can treat your own inner signals the same way, not as instructions, just as weather passing across a wide sky. Attention feels like a spotlight, yet the hand that turns it is often quiet. A small sound, a color, a remembered phrase, any of these can pull focus for a moment, without you choosing it. Experiments suggest that cues can shape what we notice, even when we can't fully report the reason. The subconscious, in this sense, is not a secret controller. It's more like gentle steering, small adjustments that keep the mind moving with less effort. So, if your attention wanders tonight, you can let it wander kindly, like a lantern swinging softly on a slow walk. Before the mind builds a full explanation, it can form a quick, subtle sense of pleasant or not for me. This kind of automatic evaluation is part of how we move through the world without exhausting ourselves. It's background processing, fast, efficient, and often outside the sentence-making part of the mind. And at night, when you're tired, those quick evaluations can feel louder than they truly are. So it may help to remember, a first feeling is not a final verdict. Perhaps you can let early impressions loosen their grip, like silt settling to the bottom of a clear jar, leaving the water quiet again. The brain is a natural pattern finder, even without deliberate practice. It can pick up regularities, rhythms, sequences, and gentle probabilities. Simply by being exposed to them. This is often described as implicit learning, and it can show up in small ways. The ease of following a familiar melody, or sensing what comes next in a simple routine. It doesn't require effortful concentration. It's more like the mind quietly braiding strands of experience into something usable. And perhaps that's one reason repetition can feel soothing at night. The mind recognizes the pattern, and the body gets permission to soften. A habit is not a moral verdict. It's often just a learned shortcut, an automatic pathway the brain uses to conserve energy. When a cue appears, a familiar response can unfold before the conscious mind has finished forming a sentence about it. That automatic flow can be helpful, especially in a busy world. And at night, it can be comforting to remember that autopilot exists for a reason. To carry small tasks so you can rest. So perhaps you can let your inner autopilot hold the wheel for a while, and you can sit back like a passenger watching soft streetlights pass. If you'd like, let the shoulders sink a few millimeters, as if setting down a small backpack. When you look back on a day, you rarely replay it frame by frame. More often, the mind stores a softened summary. The gist. This kind of compression can be efficient. It keeps meaning while releasing excess detail. It can also explain why memories sometimes feel more like an atmosphere than a photograph. The subconscious, in this sense, is a quiet editor, trimming sharp corners, grouping similar moments, and filing them under simple labels. And tonight, you don't need details. Perhaps it's enough to let the day become a gentle silhouette, fading into the dark. Memory is often less like a recording and more like rebuilding a small scene from scattered pieces. When you try to remember, the brain can pull fragments, images, emotions, bits of context, and assemble something that feels coherent. This is one reason people can remember the same moment differently. The subconscious contributes by filling gaps with what seems plausible, based on patterns it has learned over time, and that can be completely ordinary. Just the mind preferring a smooth story over a jagged blank. So perhaps, when a memory flickers tonight, you can let it be imperfect, like a dream that doesn't need to make sense to be gentle. A scent, a song, or a certain kind of light can bring a feeling before it brings an explanation. This is because context can trigger networks of association automatically. The subconscious is often the part that notices the cue, reaches for a related pattern, and sets it on the table. Quietly, you may not know why a particular evening feels tender, or why a certain room feels safe. Sometimes the reason is simply that the mind recognized a familiar arrangement of details and responded with warmth. And perhaps you can let those associations be kind tonight, like a lamp being turned down, until the room becomes soft enough for sleep. When the brain is not pinned to a task, it often drifts, thoughts appear, dissolve, and reform, sometimes as memories, sometimes as imagined scenes, sometimes as nothing in particular. This is mind wandering, and research suggests it's an ordinary state of the human mind. It can even serve gentle functions, replaying patterns, exploring possibilities, or simply letting attention loosen its grip. At night, mind wandering can feel more vivid because the outside world grows quiet. But vivid does not mean urgent. So perhaps you can let wandering thoughts be like clouds. They move across the sky, and the sky stays wide. Scientists have noticed that certain brain regions tend to be active when we're not focused on the outside world. This constellation is often called the default mode network. It's linked with inward attention, remembering, imagining, reflecting, and gently weaving a sense of me across time. You don't need to visualize the brain to feel the effect. It can simply feel like an inner narrator turning the pages of small scenes. And at night, that narrator can become softer, slower, and more dreamlike. Perhaps you can let the narrator read quietly to itself, like a book left open in lamplight, with no need to finish the chapter. Even when life is made of separate moments, the mind often prefers a thread. It links today to yesterday, and yesterday to long ago, creating a feeling of continuity. This stitching can happen beneath conscious awareness. Small edits, small connections, soft bridges. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's simply what the mind does when it has spare space. At night, when you're tired, the stitching may become more impressionistic, less like a timeline and more like a collage. And perhaps a collage is enough. You might notice the forehead smoothing, like still water finding calm. If you'd like, let the forehead feel spacious, as though the skin is gently unwrinkling. A feeling can show up like a visitor at the door. Before the mind has time to explain it, you may sense warmth, unease, or tenderness, and only later find a story to match. This can happen because the brain processes meaning in layers. Some layers are fast and quiet, evaluating tone and context before language arrives. And at night, when language slows down, you might notice those earlier layers more clearly. If a feeling appears, it doesn't have to be solved. It can simply be named softly and allowed to pass. Perhaps a feeling is just a tide line on the shore. It comes in, it goes out, and the sand remains. One way to understand the mind is as a prediction machine based on what it has learned. It constantly guesses what might happen next, so it can respond quickly without heavy computation. Most of these predictions never become full thoughts. They are subtle, a sense of what should be there, a readiness for a familiar pattern, a quiet expectation. Sometimes predictions feel like worry, especially when you're tired, so it can help to reframe them as background guesses, useful in daylight, but not always necessary at night. Perhaps you can let predictions loosen their grip, like a hand opening slowly, releasing a small pebble back into still water. In science, the word unconscious often points to something simple, a process that happens without deliberate intention, or without being fully reportable in words. It doesn't automatically mean hidden powers or secret messages. It can mean the ordinary automation of perception, memory, and habit, the background work that keeps life moving smoothly. This framing can feel calming because it removes pressure. You don't need to decode the mind to be okay. Many processes can run quietly, like dim software in the background. While you rest, perhaps you can let the mind be a quiet machine, not a riddle, a soft system humming in the dark, doing its gentle work. Have you ever chosen something and felt surprised by your own certainty? That can happen when the mind has been weighing patterns quietly, collecting tiny cues, comparing them to past experience before the conscious layer forms a clear sentence. By the time you decide, the groundwork may already be laid. This doesn't mean you are powerless. It simply means the brain is efficient, and it tries to reduce effort by preparing options in advance. At night, you can borrow that efficiency. You can let the mind prepare nothing at all and still be safe. Perhaps you can let choices rest on the shelf tonight, like tools put away, so the workshop can go dark. Sometimes you remember a feeling more clearly than you remember the facts. A moment might leave behind warmth, or unease, or tenderness, even if the details blur. This can happen because emotion and memory are woven together, yet they can travel at different speeds. The subconscious may keep a simple label: safe, familiar, heavy, bright. While the storyline softens, that isn't a flaw. It can be a kind of compression, keeping meaning while letting the sharpness fade. Perhaps you can let today's emotions become gentle labels, not commands, just little stickers on boxes, stored quietly in the back room. A feeling can appear, and the mind may search for an explanation quickly. It might borrow a nearby reason, something you saw, something you remembered, something you almost forgot, and attach the feeling to it. Psychologists call this misattribution. When the source of an emotion isn't perfectly tracked, it's common, especially when you're tired. And it can be freeing to remember that an uneasy feeling doesn't always point to a real problem in front of you. Sometimes it's just a background echo, landing on the nearest surface. Perhaps you can let that echo pass without grabbing it, like a ripple becoming a wide circle, then disappearing into still water. Whenever you're ready, let the hands loosen, as though releasing a tiny knot. In low-effort states, the mind often produces images on its own. A face, que a place, a color, a fragment of a scene, arriving without invitation, then fading. This drifting imagery can be part of the brain's natural transition towards sleep. When perception loosens from the outside world and turns inward, you don't need to interpret the images. You don't need to hold them steady. They can be like postcards sliding across a table, viewed for a moment, then returned to the pile. Perhaps you can let images come and go with no responsibility, like moonlight moving across a wall, never needing to stop. During certain stages of sleep, the brain can quietly reactivate patterns linked to recent learning. Scientists sometimes describe this as memory reactivation, small echoes of experience flickering again, without conscious effort. It isn't a perfect replay, and it isn't a movie you have to watch. It can be more like the brain gently rehearsing the shape of what happened, so it becomes easier to find later. In this way, the subconscious can keep working while you rest, sorting and smoothing what you don't need to carry so tightly into tomorrow. Perhaps sleep is a quiet librarian, reshelving pages in dim light, and you can simply be the room that stays warm and still. One popular model suggests that the hippocampus helps hold new experiences in a more temporary way, while other brain networks gradually build longer-term storage. Over time, especially with sleep, the information can become less dependent on that temporary holding space. It's sometimes described as a dialogue. The hippocampus and the cortex exchanging signals, slowly stabilizing what matters. The subconscious part of this process does not require you to try. It can happen while you do the simplest thing in the world, letting your eyes close and your body settle. Perhaps it's like moving gentle belongings from a hallway to a quiet shelf. No hurry, no noise, just a soft relocation. Some research suggests that sleep is linked with shifts in how emotional memories are processed and remembered. This doesn't mean sleep erases hard moments or guarantees a brighter morning. It simply suggests the brain can reorganize the way memories are stored, sometimes leaving the sharpest edges less dominant. The subconscious here is not a healer with a mission. It's more like gentle housekeeping, moving fragile objects to safer corners, so the room feels easier to live in. Perhaps the night rearranges the furniture of feeling just a little, and you wake to a room with more space to breathe. If you'd like, let the chest make room for one slower breath. Then let it go on its own. Dreams can feel meaningful, strange, or beautifully random. Many scientists view dreaming as connected to ongoing memory and emotion processing, rather than as secret instructions. The sleeping mind may blend fragments on faces, plus small worries, tiny joys, into a collage that doesn't need to be translated. In that sense, the subconscious is not speaking in riddles. It may simply be letting images drift as networks reorganize, the way leaves move on the surface of dark water. Perhaps a dream is a lantern seen through mist, soft, moving, and not demanding clarity. You can let it pass and keep resting. When you're tired, the mind can circle the same paths again and again, as if trying to solve the day by repetition. But the brain's deeper systems often work better with pauses than with pressure. Rest can be a boundary, not a rule, just a quiet edge, where effort stops feeding the loop. The subconscious can keep sorting in the background, while the conscious mind steps back. And even if thoughts return, you can meet them softly, as if they are visitors who do not need entertainment. Perhaps you can let thinking be like a candle at the end of its wick. It doesn't need to be blown out. It can simply dim on its own. Whenever you're ready, let the teeth unclench, as if the tongue has found a soft place to rest. When you learn something new, the memory trace can be delicate at first, like wet ink on a page. While you're awake, fresh input keeps arriving, and the brain has to juggle many competing signals. Sleep offers a quieter environment, with fewer new impressions to override what was just learned. Some research suggests this low interference window can support consolidation, helping the mind stabilize what it wants to keep. In that way, the subconscious is not adding effort. It's simply working in a calmer room. Perhaps the night is a gentle drying rack for today's thoughts. And in the stillness, the ink can set at any moment. You're surrounded by far more information than you can consciously notice. The brain filters, quietly prioritizing what seems relevant, familiar, or potentially meaningful for safety. Much of that filtering happens outside of conscious awareness, which is part of why subconscious can feel like a useful word. It's not a hidden personality. It's an attention economy, sorting signals so you don't have to. And at night, as you rest, you can let that filtering relax, like a guard lowering their lantern. Perhaps you can let the mind stop scanning, like a shoreline at midnight, with no ships to watch for. In studies of attention, people can briefly miss a second target when it appears very soon after a first one, sometimes called the attentional blink. It's a small reminder that awareness has timing limits. The brain can process more than reaches the conscious story, and it sometimes has to choose what gets a full spotlight. This doesn't mean the mind is broken. It means perception is a cue, and the subconscious often manages the line. At night, it can be calming to remember. Not everything needs to be processed. Perhaps you can let missed details be allowed, like snow falling in the dark, unnoticed and perfectly fine. Human brains are tuned to faces. Sometimes we register emotion in a micro moment. Tension around the eyes, a softening at the mouth, before we can describe it in words. This kind of fast social perception can feel intuitive, but it's often just the subconscious doing rapid pattern recognition. It helps us navigate the world with less effort, and when you're tired, these quick readings can feel more intense than they are because the mind is seeking simple signals, so it may help to hold them lightly. A cue is not a conclusion. Perhaps you can let first impressions float, like a leaf on slow water, turning once, then drifting on. Familiarity often feels comfortable, even when nothing is actively happening. This may be partly because familiar patterns are cheaper for the brain to process. The mind has predictions ready. The pathways are already warmed, so the subconscious can gently lean toward what it recognizes, not as a rule, but as an efficiency. At night, you can borrow that efficiency in a kinder direction. You might choose simple, familiar image, dark room, steady breath, quiet sounds, so the brain has fewer surprises to manage. Perhaps you can let the mind walk a well-known path, not because it must, just because it's soft underfoot. If you'd like, let the shoulders sink again, as if gravity is kind. Much of daily life would be exhausting if every action required a fresh decision. So the brain builds scripts, learned sequences that can run with little conscious supervision. You might notice this when you arrive somewhere and barely remember the route, or when your hands complete a familiar task before you think about it. This isn't a sign that you are absent. It's a sign that the mind is efficient, letting the subconscious handle routine so the conscious layer can rest. And at night, you can allow those scripts to slow down. Like a theater, after the audience has gone home, perhaps the backstage crew can dim the lights now. Nothing needs to be performed. It can be tempting to imagine subconscious processing as crude or shallow, but many automatic systems are surprisingly flexible. They can learn patterns, adjust to context, and respond to subtle cues, without producing a sentence about what they're doing. In research, this is part of the modern view. Unconscious processing can be systematic, and sometimes quite sophisticated. The difference is not intelligence, but visibility. Some processes are like roots underground, complex, branching, and mostly unseen. Perhaps your mind has more quiet skill than you ever need to prove. It can work softly, and you can rest. Sometimes a word or a name feels close, yet not accessible. You can sense it hovering, even when you can't retrieve it. This tip of the tongue experience suggests that memory retrieval can happen in layers. The subconscious may be searching, narrowing, and testing possibilities before the final answer appears in awareness. It can feel a little restless, but it's also ordinary, like hearing footsteps in a hallway before the door opens. At night, you don't have to complete the search. You can let the hallway stay quiet. Perhaps unfinished recall can be set down gently, like a letter left on a table, to be opened another day. Not everything you encounter becomes a stable memory. The mind has to choose, quietly, what is relevant, repeated, or emotionally marked. Some of that selection may happen before you could ever describe it. A phrase, a tone of voice, a gentle pattern. These can be tagged as meaningful without forming a clear, conscious intention. This is one way subconscious processing can feel like a soft editor. It underlines a sentence in pencil, then moves on. And when you sleep, those penciled lines may be the ones that stay. Perhaps your mind is highlighting what matters, quietly, with no need for effort, like starlight touching only a few calm rooftops. Prediction is not only about thoughts, it's also about the body. When breathing is shallow, the brain may interpret the state as alertness, and it can bias attention towards scanning. When breathing becomes slower, many people notice that predictions soften, less urgency, more space. This is not a command, and it doesn't have to be forced. It's simply a reminder that subconscious systems listen to the body's signals, and the body can offer quiet reassurance, one gentle exhale at a time. Perhaps you can let the breath be a small lighthouse, not searching, just shining softly, steady in the dark. If you'd like, let the belly soften for a moment, as though it doesn't have to hold anything up. Learning is not only adding information, it's also subtraction. The brain gradually learns which signals are noise. That's why a ticking clock can fade from awareness, or a familiar hum can disappear once it becomes predictable. Much of this filtering happens quietly, without an announcement. In a gentle sense, the subconscious is an editor of attention, deciding what deserves ink and what can remain blank. At night, this can be reassuring. You don't have to monitor every sound or thought. The mind already knows how to let many things pass. Perhaps you can let the world become background, like rain on a roof, steady and unclaimed. When a pattern repeats, the brain spends less energy. It can predict what comes next, and prediction reduces surprise. This is one reason repetitive sounds, soft music, a fan, steady waves, can feel calming for many people. The subconscious is doing quiet accounting. Fewer unknowns, fewer alarms. Even repetitive thoughts can be reframed this way, not as a flaw, but as the mind circling a familiar track, because it's easier than inventing a new one. At night, you can gently allow repetition without needing to solve it. Perhaps repetition is a lullaby the brain already knows, a well-worn path that stays soft underfoot. If you'd like, let the feet feel heavy, as though they've found their home. Sometimes, a small detail becomes linked to a feeling, a certain light, a certain time of day. À certaines phrases, later, the feeling can return when the detail returns. Even if you don't consciously connect the dots, This is one way the brain learns. It bookmarks experiences with emotion, so it can respond quickly in the future. The bookmark is not destiny. It's information, often rough, often incomplete. And at night, when old bookmarks flutter, it can help to remember they are simply tags, not commands. Perhaps you can let the bookmark stay in the book. You don't have to turn every page. When you're lying in the dark and thoughts keep arriving, it can feel personal, like you're doing something wrong. But scanning is a default behavior for many brains. The mind checks. Is anything unfinished? Is anything uncertain? This can be useful in daytime, yet at night it can continue out of habit. You don't have to fight it. You can simply notice it as a background system, like a radio that hasn't realized the room is empty. And sometimes, when you stop arguing with the noise, the radio fades on its own. Perhaps you can let scanning be a passing weather front. It moves through, and the sky returns to quiet. Beyond strengthening individual memories, sleep may help the brain integrate information, linking new material with older knowledge. That can feel like suddenly understanding a pattern the next day, or finding that a concept sits more naturally in the mind. Some researchers describe this as building networks. Experiences become less isolated, more connected. The subconscious does this without a lecture. It connects dots quietly, sometimes with dreams, sometimes with simple reweighting of associations. At night, you don't need to supervise the process. You can let the mind weave in the background. Perhaps your thoughts are threads in warm cloth, and the night is a slow hand, weaving without hurry. Whenever you're ready, let the fingers loosen again, as though they're allowed to stop holding the day. Many researchers see dreaming not as coded prophecy, but as a continuation of waking thought in a different register. The mind keeps moving, even when the body is still, blending fragments of recent experience with older memories, soft images, and small feelings. Some dreams may emphasize emotion. Others may rehearse familiar patterns. Often they don't need translation, and they don't need to be remembered. At night, you can let dreamlike thinking pass like clouds shifting in the dark, without trying to name each shape. Perhaps a dream is the mind painting in soft watercolors, and the colors are allowed to run without making a finished picture. A typical night isn't one solid block of sleep. It tends to move through stages, lighter and deeper, repeating in slow cycles. You don't have to track them. The brain manages this rhythm on its own, the way the body manages breathing. Some stages emphasize quiet body work. Others may be linked with dreaming and memory activity. None of it requires effort. You're allowed to let the cycles unfold by themselves, like waves arriving and receding without supervision. Perhaps the night has its own slow choreography, and you can rest as the audience with no part to play. In deeper, non-dreaming sleep, the brain often produces large amdas, end quote, slow waves. These slow waves are linked with how the brain stabilizes recent learning. Small adjustments that may help today's experiences settle into longer-term storage. You don't need to make this happen. You don't need to earn deep sleep with effort. It tends to arrive when the body has permission to let go. And tonight, that permission can be very simple. Nothing left to do. Perhaps the night has tides that wash gently across the mind, and each slow wave leaves the shore a little quieter. Maybe the eyelids can be curtains, gently closing without effort. Many parts of the body's chemistry shift toward evening. Stress-related signals can ease, sleep-related signals can rise. This isn't a switch, more like a gentle dimmer that turns down activation by small degrees. You may notice it as a heavier feeling in the limbs, a softer focus in the eyes, a willingness to set things down. None of this is a task. The body knows how to do this if it has space. Perhaps the evening is exhaling slowly through you, and you can be a calm room, letting the breath move through. A small twitch, a flutter in the chest, a tingle in the fingers. These can appear without meaning anything in particular. The body produces a steady stream of micro-sensations, and the mind notices a few of them at random. They don't always need a story. They don't always need a response. At night, when you're paying more attention to internal experience, harmless signals can sometimes feel louder, and it can be soothing to remember. Noticing isn't the same as needing to act. Perhaps a sensation is like a leaf landing on water, a small ripple, then stillness again. While you rest, the body is making small adjustments you rarely notice. Blinking, swallowing, shifting position, regulating temperature. These micro-actions happen quietly, mostly without conscious involvement. They are part of the wider network of automatic systems. The subconscious helps coordinate. You don't have to inspect them. You don't have to manage them. They simply continue, the way a clock keeps time without needing your attention. Perhaps the body knows how to keep its small rhythms, and you can be the room where the clock ticks softly in the background. Even when much of the cortex is quieter, deeper structures keep going, maintaining breath, heart, and other essential rhythms. This division of labor allows the more detail-focused parts of the brain to soften without anything essential being dropped. The subconscious, in this sense, isn't only memory and association. It's also the steady drumbeat underneath conscious life. You can imagine that drumbeat as a calm metronome, marking time gently while you rest. Perhaps the body has an inner candle that simply stays lit. You don't have to tend it. You might let each finger relax. On a buwan, like a quiet roll call. Across a lifetime, the body learns small associations between sensations and safety. Warmth, soft pressure, weight on the chest, a familiar sound. These can become quiet signals that the system can settle. The subconscious recognizes them quickly, often before language. You don't have to manufacture comfort. You can simply notice what already feels gentle. The temperature of the blanket, the support beneath you, the steady contact of the bed. Perhaps comfort is already in the room, and you can let the body lean into what is already kind. It can feel as though calm starts in the mind and spreads down, but often it works the other way. A slower breath, looser muscles, a laisse alerte posture. These signals can quietly tell the brain that the moment is safe. The subconscious notices, and many other systems respond. This isn't a technique, it's a relationship. The body and brain talking softly through small cues. You don't have to be perfect at it. Just letting the body rest a little is enough information. Perhaps the mind learns to settle by feeling the body settle first, and the night can take care of the rest. Falling asleep is not a single action, It's a slow conversation across many systems: body chemistry, brain rhythms, breathing, temperature. Attention, none of it works well under pressure. The harder you try to achieve sleep, the more alert the system can become. The gentler approach is to lay down conditions: quiet, warmth, low effort, and then let the systems find each other in their own time. The subconscious is part of that team, working with you, not against you. Perhaps sleep is something that arrives, not something you produce. And tonight, you can simply leave the door open. You might notice the chest making room for one slower breath. When you're not focusing on a task, the mind doesn't become empty. It shifts into a background mode, quietly weaving memories, feelings, and small plans. Researchers often describe this as stimulus-independent thought, linked with networks such as the default mode network. It isn't a secret personality. It's a natural way the brain uses downtime, especially when the outside world is dim. In a sleep-friendly frame, this background mode can be seen as gentle maintenance, rather than something to control. Perhaps your mind has a night side, not mysterious, just softly active, like a lamp in another room. You might sense that something feels familiar or safe before you can say why. This can happen because the brain processes in layers. Faster layers evaluate patterns, tone, and context, while slower layers translate experience into words. In subconscious processing, the earlier layers don't need to speak. They only need to offer a gentle signal. And at night, those signals can feel more noticeable because the day's noise is lower, like a breeze moving a curtain. Before you notice the window is open. Automatic processes are often energy-saving. Habits, quick evaluations, and learned routines reduce the need to compute everything from scratch. This doesn't make you a machine. It makes you human. In a calm frame, these shortcuts can be imagined as gentle pathways, well-worn trails. The brain can walk, so the conscious mind can rest. On a sleep night, it can be comforting to remember that not everything requires deliberate effort. Perhaps the brain has soft footpaths it can follow, while you simply lie still. A scent, a melody, a certain kind of light can bring a feeling without a story. That can happen because memory is not only stored as facts, but as networks of association. The subconscious often notices the cue, reaches into the web, and brings forward a tone, warmth, tenderness, neutrality. Before you can name the link, you don't have to chase the reason. The mind is allowed to connect quietly, like roots sharing water underground. Unseen, still real. When the nervous system feels unsafe, attention narrows. The mind scans for problems, and the future can feel sharp. But when safety cues appear, warmth, steadier breath, familiar kit, the mind often widens again. In that wider state, subconscious processing can feel less like vigilance and more like gentle sorting. It's not that the world becomes perfect. It's that the brain no longer treats everything as urgent. Perhaps the space between the brows can widen, just a little, as if the face is letting go of a small task. Mind wandering often pulls from memory, imagination, and meaning. It can replay fragments, test social scenarios, or explore outcomes sometimes with no clear goal. In research, this wandering is treated as a common mode of cognition, not a mistake. For sleep content, you can frame it softly, the mind trying out shapes, like clouds changing form. Without requiring you to act, perhaps thoughts can drift like clouds, changing quietly. While the sky stays wide, the brain compresses experience. Instead of storing every detail, it often stores themes. What mattered? What felt safe? What felt heavy? What seemed new? This gist can guide future attention without needing a full replay. At night, gist-based memory can feel like an atmosphere rather than a story. And that's okay. Atmosphere is easier to release than a full narrative, like a silhouette of the day, soft-edged, fading into a calm background. Many background processes, learning, association, prediction, memory, reactivation, can run without your awareness. They don't require rituals. They don't require decoding. They simply happen as part of being alive. This can be reassuring, because it means rest is not passive. Rest is a condition in which the mind can keep soft maintenance going. While you do nothing at all, perhaps the night shift can keep working with the lights turned low. While you drift towards sleep. In priming studies, a recent word, faire image, or idea, can make related material easier to notice or respond to, sometimes without conscious awareness of the influence. It's less like being controlled and more like the mind warming up certain pathways. At night, this can be framed as a soft echo. What you read, hear, or see can leave a faint trace that lightly shapes attention. And just knowing this can help you treat thoughts with a little less seriousness, like a warm mug in your hands, leaving a trace of warmth even after you set it down. Explicit memory is the kind you can describe. Names, dates, and clear recollections. Implicit memory is different. It shows up as familiarity, gevoel, or preference, without a clear story attached. Research on implicit processes suggests that what you've learned can shape behavior without needing to be announced, in a sleep-friendly lens that can feel reassuring. You don't need to replay the day perfectly for learning to settle in. Perhaps some lessons sink in like rain into soil, without any need for words. Many unconscious or automatic processes strengthen with repetition, especially patterns that keep you safe, help you predict, or reduce effort. This is one reason routines can feel comforting. The mind knows what comes next, so it doesn't have to calculate. When you're getting sleepy, repetition can become a kind of lullaby for the brain. Predictable, low demand, and steady. If you'd like, let the arms rest as though they've been placed down carefully. Nothing to hold. Sometimes an insight arrives after a break, or the next day feels clearer without a dramatic change. This can happen because the brain continues to process, integrate, and reorganize information offline. Sleep-related research describes reactivation and consolidation as mechanisms that may support these changes. It's not a promise of transformation, just a gentle reminder that rest can be part of how the mind makes sense of things, like a desk tidied in dim light. Not perfect, simply calmer. The brain often evaluates cues, tone of voice, Facial expression. Context. Before conscious analysis catches up, this can help with fast adaptation, but it can also create feelings that arrive first. In a calmer frame, it helps to treat these early signals as suggestions, not commands. They're part of the mind's protective automation, not a final story about reality. Perhaps feelings can be like weather reports, useful and still allowed to pass. Instead of storing each moment as a perfect recording, the brain often stores themes and emotional tones. This compression helps you generalize and predict. At night, these themes can show up as a mood: soft, unnamed, present. When that happens, it may help to remember atmosphere isn't a problem to solve. It's simply a layer moving through, like mist in a forest. It doesn't need to be chased. It only needs space. Reviews of sleep and memory describe how recently learned patterns can be reactivated during sleep, supporting stabilization and integration. This is sometimes framed as a dialogue between hippocampus and neocortex, like moving notes from a temporary pad into a larger library. For a sleepy listener, this can be a gentle image. While you rest, the brain may be doing quiet filing. Perhaps a night librarian is reshelving today's pages. Slowly, carefully, by DREAMLAND, dreaming can blend fragments, memories, images, emotions into a loose collage. Many perspectives see dreams as connected to waking thought and memory activity, without needing them to be prophecy or instruction. In a soothing frame, dreams can be treated like foam on a wave, a surface pattern that forms and dissolves, while deeper processes continue underneath. Perhaps the mind paints in watercolors at night, and the colors are allowed to run. The brain doesn't process thoughts in isolation from the body. When the body feels tense, the mind often scans for what might be wrong. When the body softens, warmth, a steadier breath, a supported posture, the attention can loosen its grip. The subconscious then has more room for softer associations, wider meaning, and gentler memory mixing. This isn't a trick. It's simply how closely the nervous system and cognition are linked. Whenever you're ready, let the arms feel heavy and settled, as if they've been placed down with care. Perception is not only receiving the world, it's also predicting it. The brain uses prior experience to anticipate what comes next, filling gaps and smoothing the flow. Much of this predictive processing happens without conscious commentary. In a sleep-friendly frame, prediction can be imagined as quiet preparation, like the mind laying down soft paths so the waking self doesn't have to work as hard. Like lanterns along a path, lit before you arrive, so the walk can stay gentle. At night, thoughts can feel symbolic or charged simply because the environment is quieter. But a thought can be many things: a memory fragment, a primed association, a predictive echo, or a piece of mind wandering. It doesn't have to be decoded. In fact, treating every thought as a message can make the mind more alert. A calmer approach is to let thoughts be weather, appearing, shifting, and passing. Perhaps a thought can be like a ripple on dark water, present and still allowed to fade. Some moments become easier to recall, not because they were longer, but because they carried an emotional tag: novelty, warmth, surprise, tenderness. These tags can guide memory and attention later, sometimes without a clear story, in gentle narration. You can frame this as the mind's way of caring. It highlights what seemed meaningful, even when you didn't ask it to, like a soft bookmark placed in a page, not demanding, simply remembering. A plus, a sound, or a routine can feel calming before you identify why. That's often implicit memory at work. Associations learned over time. The subconscious doesn't always explain itself. It simply leans toward what has felt safe before. At bedtime, this can become a small kindness. Repeating familiar cues can help the brain settle with less effort, like returning to a shoreline you've walked before. The feet remember, even in the dark. When external stimuli drop, dim light, fewer sounds, the brain's internal dynamics become more noticeable. Default mode activity, memory fragments, and mind wandering can rise to the foreground. This doesn't mean something is wrong. It can simply mean the internal world has room to be heard. In a sleep frame, it's okay to let that room exist without filling it with effort. Perhaps silence is not empty. Perhaps it's spacious. Like sky after dusk, the body can hold small habits, clenching, bracing, tightening, without conscious choice. These habits often formed for good reasons. Readiness, protection, focus. But at night, the same habits can keep the system alert. The gentlest approach isn't to fight them, it's to notice them and offer an alternative. A small release that the subconscious can accept as a safety cue. Maybe let the jaw hang on a tiny hinge of ease, as if the mouth has nothing left to hold. When memory elements reactivate, especially during rest, they can recombine. This recombination may support insight, imaginative links, and new associations. It's not a promise of solutions. It's simply a way the brain explores possibility space. For sleep content, creativity can be framed as gentle wandering. No goal, no urgency, just soft rearranging, like pieces of a collage drifting on a table and quietly finding a new pattern. Many processes, implicit learning, priming, prediction, consolidation, happen whether you observe them or not. You don't need to manage them. You don't need to do it right. You can simply rest in the idea that background systems are built to keep working gently. And if the mind feels busy, that can be okay too. Busy doesn't mean broken. It can just mean the night shift is still tidying. Perhaps you can let the mind do what minds do, quietly, patiently, while you drift deep inside the body. An internal clock helps many systems keep time together. It notices light, dark, and the steady arc of the day, then sends gentle signals across the brain and the body. This is one reason evening can feel different from morning. Even when nothing dramatic has changed, the subconscious works with this rhythm, not against it. You don't have to tune the clock. It knows what the night is for, and it can guide you toward rest in its own quiet way. Perhaps the body has a slow lullaby it has been singing for years, and tonight, you can simply hum along. Researchers have found sleep-like states in many kinds of animals, from small fish to large mammals. Rest seems to be part of how living things keep functioning. This can be a soft reframe at night. Needing rest is not a personal flaw. It's an old, shared pattern, woven through countless species. The subconscious is in good company. It does its quiet work alongside the rest of the living world. Perhaps the night belongs to a wide chorus of resting beings, and you can take your gentle place among them. Natural sounds, wind through leaves, waves along a shore, distant rain, often carry broadband textures. The brain doesn't have to work hard to track them, because they're predictable in a soft, irregular way. This is one reason such sounds can feel calming. The subconscious settles into the pattern. With little to do, you don't need to be near a beach or a forest. The memory of these textures can do similar work. When invited, if you'd like, let the shoulders sink a little, as if a wave just passed through them. Perhaps the breath can become its own soft tide, and the room can hold you the way a quiet shore holds the sea. In many rivers, the water doesn't move in one straight line. It splits into braids, joins again, and finds its own pace around small islands of stone. Thoughts can move like that too, dividing, looping, returning. The subconscious doesn't require a single thread. It can hold many small currents at once, without needing to choose a winner. At night, you don't have to organize them. You can let them braid and rejoin in the dark, like water finding its way home. Perhaps the mind has its own quiet delta, and tonight, all of its currents are allowed to drift. Beneath the canopy, the forest floor is busy in subtle ways. Leaves break down. Fungi share signals between roots. Seeds settle into soft soil. Most of this happens slowly, and most of it is invisible from above. The subconscious is a little like that understory, doing maintenance, recycling, and small repairs without asking for credit. You don't have to watch it. You can rest like the canopy that lets the work happen below. Perhaps the forest floor is at peace tonight, and your inner forest can be too. Nature rarely changes everything at once. Leaves shift color over weeks. Rivers freeze in stages. Mornings grow shorter by minutes, not by hours. The subconscious can be reassured by this rhythm. Not every change has to be dramatic. Not every shift has to be solved tonight. Like a season turning, your inner life can move in small steps, mostly when you're not looking. Perhaps you can let tonight be one quiet page in a long, soft chapter. The story is allowed to unfold slowly. When daylight ends, many parts of the natural world don't stop. They simply shift. Nocturnal creatures take their slow turns. Flowers that close in the day open in the dark. The air carries different textures of sound, often softer. The night is its own kind of busy, but it's a gentler busy. Your inner night can be the same, not empty, just quietly active in different ways. Perhaps the space between the brows can widen just a little, like a clearing in a forest. Perhaps the mind has its own nocturnal ecology, and it has been doing this for a very long time. In some forests, oceans, and caves, living things produce their own gentle light. This bioluminescence is small, blue-green flickers, slow pulses, soft glows under leaves and waves. It rarely hurts the eye. It rarely demands attention. The subconscious can carry images like these into rest. Small lights that don't need to be bright to belong to the night. You don't have to be a strong light. A soft glow is enough to be part of the world. Perhaps you can be a small lantern of warmth in the dark. Nothing flashing, just gently lit. At the surface, the ocean can be busy. Wind, waves, sunlight on the water, but deeper down, conditions become more stable. Temperature changes slowly. Light fades. Motion gentles into soft drifts. Your inner experience can have a deep ocean too. The surface may shimmer with thoughts, while a quieter, slower layer rests below. The subconscious is comfortable in those slower depths. It doesn't need the surface to be still. Perhaps you can sink, slowly, toward your own deep layer, where the water is calm and the pressure becomes a kind of softness. Moss doesn't hurry. It thickens in millimeters across whole seasons. It holds water without grabbing. It softens stone over many years. Much of life's gentle, persistent work happens at this pace. The subconscious can move slowly too, turning over old thoughts, easing emotional edges, shaping memory in barely visible ways. Maybe the forehead can feel spacious, like cool stone covered in soft moss. Perhaps you don't need to grow tonight. The smallest, slowest movements are still alive. When sunlight passes through layers of leaves, it doesn't arrive as a hard beam. It arrives as dappled patches, soft greens and golds, scattered across the ground. Much of the natural world prefers this kind of softened light. The subconscious also seems to prefer softened input at night. Dim rooms, quiet sounds, gentle stimuli. You can imagine your awareness becoming filtered, the way a forest filters the sun. Perhaps everything that reaches you can be a little softer now. Light, sound, a thought, filtered through leaves. Rain has a forgiving sound. It repeats, but never identically. The small differences keep it interesting. The larger pattern keeps it predictable. For many minds, this kind of texture invites attention to settle. The subconscious sinks into the rhythm, and the cognitive machinery slows. You don't need actual rain. The memory of rain, or simply the steady rhythm of breath, can do similar quiet work. Whenever you're ready, let the hands open slightly, the way leaves open to gentle rain. Perhaps the night is a long, soft rain on the roof of the mind, and you can listen, without listening too closely. Underneath many forests, fungi and roots form quiet networks that share water, signals, and small nutrients. Most of this exchange is hidden. From the surface, you would only see trees standing peacefully. Beneath them, life is helping life. In a slow language, the subconscious has its own underground networks. Association, memories, shared meanings, linking experiences in soft, unseen ways. You don't need to map them. The network knows how to keep itself in balance. Perhaps your mind has roots reaching toward kindness in the dark, quietly braided, quietly fed. Many birds sing in repeating phrases. With rests in between, the patterns aren't identical, but they're stable enough to feel like ritual. It's one reason birdsong can be soothing in waking hours. At night, the memory of those patterns can carry into rest. The subconscious enjoys structure that doesn't demand attention. It feels safe inside small, repeating shapes, like a song that knows where it's going. Perhaps the breath can be your own quiet refrain. Nothing to perform, just a small, returning melody. After sunset, sharp temperature differences in the natural world tend to ease. Warm rocks slowly release their heat. Cool air rolls down hillsides without rushing. Boundaries blur a little, where the warm meets the cool, where the day meets the night. The subconscious also seems to blur edges in this softer hour. Thoughts feel less rigid. The sharp lines of decisions can soften. You don't need clarity tonight. You can let the edges soften, like the air at dusk. Perhaps your inner horizon is dimming gently, and the borders between things can be tender. In warm summer fields, fireflies blink in patterns. Some species coordinate, others flicker on their own private timing. Either way, the meadow becomes softly punctuated with light. The brain seems to respond well to gentle rhythms, patterns that come and go without urgency. The subconscious can use these rhythms as quiet anchors. A breath in, a breath out, a small thought, then space. If you'd like, let the breath be quiet enough to barely be noticed. Perhaps you can be a soft, blinking light in a wide, dark field. Nothing to prove, just gently here. As the day fades, many parts of nature dim their activity. Flowers close, leaves still. Some animals withdraw to quiet places. Your body has a similar pattern. Muscles loosen. Digestion slows in its evening pace. The nervous system shifts towards settling. The subconscious participates in this dimming, easing its grip on alertness. You aren't fighting nature when you fall asleep. You're joining a wide, slow movement that has been happening forever. Perhaps the world is exhaling tonight, and you can exhale with it. In a healthy ecosystem, countless small processes continue without anyone overseeing them. Decomposition, pollination, water cycles, temperature regulation. The forest doesn't hold meetings. The river doesn't make plans. It simply works. The subconscious is similar. It sorts, predicts, integrates, and reorganizes, mostly on its own. You don't have to be a manager of your own mind tonight. You can be a part of the larger system, supported by what already knows how to function. Perhaps your job is simply to lie down inside the ecology of yourself and let it tend to itself. When wind dies down, a pond can become a soft mirror. It doesn't try to reflect. It simply stops moving, and the world above arrives on its surface. Reflection in the mind can be similar. When the day's wind eases, the surface of attention naturally smooths. The subconscious doesn't need a special technique. It just needs space and time. Maybe the jaw can hang on a small hinge of ease. Perhaps your awareness is becoming a quiet pond tonight, and whatever passes overhead can simply be reflected, then released. After a heavy snowfall, the world can feel hushed. Snow absorbs sound waves, softening the ordinary noises of life. It's a reminder that quiet isn't only an absence. It can be a kind of soft material, draped over the day. The subconscious enjoys this kind of physical quiet. It finds rest in the way sound is gently held. Instead of bouncing around sharp surfaces, you can imagine that sort of softness around your own mind tonight. a layer of quiet, settling on everything. Perhaps the whole inner world is wearing snow, and nothing has to be loud anymore. Mountains can seem unchanging, the way a tall figure can seem permanent, but over time, water and wind shape them, very gently, very slowly. A stream barely scratches a stone. A breeze barely moves a grain of sand. Yet, across years, the shape changes. The subconscious works on a similar, slow scale. Not every reshaping needs to be felt. Most of it happens beneath the surface. While you do nothing dramatic at all, perhaps your inner mountain is being softened, very gently, by a kind night, and you don't have to feel each grain. When a pebble drops into still water, it sinks slowly. There may be a small ripple, then quiet. The pebble doesn't struggle against the water. It simply moves toward where it can be held. Thoughts and feelings can move that way too. They rise, they fall. Most of them are not announcing anything urgent. The subconscious is comfortable with this gentle settling. You might let the shoulders drift down, the way a small stone sinks softly through clear water. Perhaps tonight, every thought can be a quiet pebble, returning to a deeper place that already knows how to hold it. A shoreline isn't a hard line. It moves a little with each wave, breathing in and out across the sand. Boundaries between me and the world, between awake and asleep, can be a bit like that. Softer than they seem. The subconscious is at ease in these soft boundaries. It doesn't need to know exactly when sleep begins. It can let the edge be a slow tide, coming closer, easing back, and coming closer again. Perhaps you don't have to find the line between waking and rest. You can simply lean toward the tide. Clouds don't hold their shapes. They gather, drift, scatter, and reform, mostly without effort, mostly without any clear destination. Nothing is wrong when a cloud changes form. It's just doing what clouds do. The contents of the mind can move in similar ways at night, forming and dissolving, joining and separating, with no requirement to settle into a final image. The subconscious accepts this changeability. It doesn't mind the lack of a plan. Perhaps your inner sky is full of soft, shifting clouds tonight, and none of them need to land. Of all the patterns the natural world keeps, this is one of the steadiest. Night returns, and rest returns. It has happened countless times before this evening. It will happen countless times again. Whatever this particular night brings, the wider rhythm continues. The subconscious knows this. It has been part of these returns longer than you can remember. And tonight, it can simply be carried by them, like a small boat on a familiar tide. Whenever you're ready, let the whole body feel held by the night, as if the dark itself is a soft hand. Perhaps you can trust the night to be a night again, and rest to be rest, as it has always been. And perhaps this is one gentle way to see the subconscious tonight, not as a hidden master pulling secret strings, and not as a riddle that demands to be solved, more like a quiet night shift, doing small, careful work in the background. It sorts, it softens, it reorganizes a little while you simply rest. It stitches the day's loose threads into something easier to carry tomorrow, with no effort from you at all. You don't need to remember any of these facts. You don't need to track which cluster you heard, or which metaphor stayed. If any of them have already drifted away, that's perfect. Letting things go is part of how the mind makes room for rest. If sleep has already taken you, that's wonderful. There is nothing left to do. If you're still awake, you don't need to worry. You don't need to perform sleep, or earn it, or chase it. You can simply keep resting. Keep being a quiet room, where many soft systems are allowed to continue their work. Maybe you can let the jaw and shoulders soften one more time, as though gravity has become kind. Maybe the forehead can feel spacious, like cool air over a wide field. Maybe the hands can rest open, with nothing to hold. If the mind drifts to a thought, that's all right. Thoughts can be like clouds in the wide sky of the night, free to move on without you. The subconscious has been working in this quiet way for a very long time. It was there before this video began. It will be there after the last word fades. It doesn't need your permission, and it doesn't need your approval. It only needs a little space to do its small, ordinary work. And tonight, you have given it that space, simply by being here. So perhaps you can let yourself sink, very slowly, like a pebble into still water. Not dramatically, not quickly, just softly returning to a deeper place that already knows how to hold you. You can let breath happen on its own. You can let the body be heavy. You can let the night be a night. May your dreams be gentle. If dreams arrive, may your rest be soft. Even if it does not look like the rest you imagined, may tomorrow find you with a little more space than you started this evening. And may the quiet work of your own mind continue. Kindly, beneath everything you do. Good night. From here, you don't have to do anything more. The night will keep going on its own, and you can simply rest.